Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat utama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Hare Krishna. It's May 30th, 2021. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, entitled Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. We're continuing with text 33. This will be our third class and discussion on text 33. This is the first of the 4 seed verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. And today we'll continue with the purport. Okay, so text 33, we'll go through the Sanskrit. Aham eva asam eva agre na anyat yat sat asat param paschat aham yat etat cha ya avashisheta sa asmi aham. Okay. And now we'll do the one line at a time. Aham eva sam eva gre nanyat yad sadasat param paschat aham yade tachcha yo vashisheta sosmyaham. Aham eva sam eva gre nanyat yad sadasat param paschat aham yade tachcha yo vashisheta sosmyaham. Aham eva sam eva gre nanyat yad sadasat param paschat aham yade tachcha yo vashisheta sosmyaham. Aham eva sam eva gre nanyat yad sadasat param paschat aham yad etachcha yo vashisheta sosmyaham. Online, would someone like to recite?
Aham eva sam eva gre
Aham eva sam eva gre
Nadyad yat sarasat param
nanyat yad sadasat param
Pascharat aham yare tacha
paschat aham yade tachcha
Yo vashisheta sosmyaham.
yo vashisheta sosmyaham.
Aham eva sam eva gre
Aham eva sam eva gre
nanyat yat sadasat param
Anyadyat Sarasat Param.
Pashadaham yadetacha.
Paschat Yadetatcha.
Yovashiyeta sosmyaham.
Yovashisheta Sosmyaham. We'll go to the word for word. Aham. I, the personality of Godhead. Eva. Certainly. Asam. Existed. Eva. Only. Agre. Before the creation. Na. Never. Anyat. Anything else. Yat. All those. Sat. The effect. Asat. The cause. Param. The supreme. Paschat. At the end. Aham. I, the personality of Godhead. Yat. All these. Etat. Creation. Cha. Also. Ya. Everything. Avashisheta. Remains. Sa. That. Asmi. I am. Aham. I, the personality of Godhead. Translation. Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation when there was nothing but myself. Nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. So we're going to continue in the purport. And we're starting with the paragraph in the purport, maybe in the last third of the purport. It starts with, in some of the Vedas, it is also said, it's right after the paragraph that starts with, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So we're going to continue with Srila Prabhupada's purport. In some of the Vedas, it is also said that in the beginning, only the impersonal Brahman existed. However, according to this verse, the impersonal Brahman, which is the glowing effulgence of the body of the Supreme Lord, may be called the immediate cause. But the cause of all causes, or the remote cause, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord's impersonal feature is existent in the material world because by material senses or materialized, the Lord cannot be seen or perceived. One has to spiritualize the senses before one can expect to see or perceive the Supreme Lord. But he is always engaged in his personal capacity, and he is eternally visible to the inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka, eye to eye. Therefore, he is materially impersonal, just as the executive head of the state may be impersonal in the government offices, although he is not impersonal in the government house. Similarly, the Lord is not impersonal in his abode, which is always nirasta kuakam, as stated in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. Therefore, both the impersonal and personal features of the Lord are acceptable, as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. The personality of Godhead is very emphatically explained in the Bhagavad-Gita in connection with the verse Brahmano hi pratishtaham. That's from Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 14, text 27. Therefore, in all ways, the confidential part of spiritual knowledge is realization of the personality of Godhead, and not his impersonal Brahman feature. One should therefore have his ultimate aim of realization not in the impersonal feature, but in the personal feature of the absolute truth. The example of the sky within the pot and the sky outside the pot may be helpful to the student for his realization of the all-pervading quality of the cosmic consciousness of the absolute truth, but that does not mean that the individual part and parcel of the Lord becomes the supreme by a false claim. it means only that the conditioned soul is a victim of the illusory energy in her last snare. To claim to be one with the cosmic consciousness of the Lord is the last trap set by the illusory energy or Devi Maya. Even in the impersonal existence of the Lord, as it is in the material creation, one should aspire for personal realization of the Lord, and that is the meaning of Pashtat Aham Nirechach Chayo Vashishe Tasosmyam. Brahmaji also accepted the same truth when he was instructing Narada. He said, Soyam te vihitas tata Bhagavan Vishva Bhavana. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 50. There is no other cause of all causes than the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari. Therefore, this verse, Aham Eva, never indicates anything other than the Supreme Lord. And one should therefore follow the path of the Brahma Sampradaya, or the path from Brahmaji to Narada, to Vyasadeva, etc., and make it a point in life to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, or Lord Krishna. This very confidential instruction to the pure devotees of the Lord was also given to Arjuna and to Brahma in the beginning of the creation. The demigods like Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna are undoubtedly different forms of the Lord for execution of different functions. The different elemental ingredients of material creation, as well as the multifarious energies, also may be of the same personality of Godhead, but the root of all of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. One should be attached to the root of everything rather than bewildered by branches and leaves. That is the instruction given in this verse. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Upakadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansikalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 33. Aham eva sameva agre nanyad yad sadasat param pastat aham yadetach cha yovashishe tasosmyaham. Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. So lots of I's there, lots of I's. Brahma, it is I. That which you see now is also I. And after annihilation will also be I. So I is aham. Okay, so and we mentioned this back on in the Thursday discussion. The first seed verse of Bhagavad-Gita starts with I, aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate ti matva bhajante mam buddhabhav samadhi. I am the source of all material and spiritual energies. So Prabhupada stresses this, because Krishna stresses this, that of course there are different facets of the absolute truth, just like a diamond might have different facets. And if we look through different angles with different lighting, we get a different image. So it's all one diamond, but there's different facets. So okay, so Krishna is stressing, I am the source of all spiritual material energies. It was I who existed before this flashing dream of the whole cosmic creation. The whole cosmic manifestation is nothing but a flashing dream, says Brahma. So it's the personality of Godhead, the personality, the form that is, well, Prabhupada's using this word, root. We used that yesterday. Damayanti made a comment about radical responsibility, right? So radical, the root of radical is root. And so Prabhupada says, but the root of all of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should be attached to the root of everything. So our nature is to be attached. There's a lot of talk, like in personal growth. Just don't be attached. Just don't be attached. Don't be attached. We say it all the time. Don't be attached. Okay, now here's the thing. Our nature is to be attached. Okay, so our choice is to be attached to matter or spirit. And we're attached to matter, and then we're setting ourselves up for frustration, depression, anxiety, frustration, resentment, because matter did not act the way I wanted it to. It didn't unfold the way I wanted it to. Or even if it did, okay, then I'm elated. Either way, I'm alienated from the actual bliss of the soul. So our choice to be attached to spirit. Okay, so attached to spirit. Well, what's that mean? And so it's described here. Ahame vasame vagre. So earlier in the Bhagavatam, Viranti tat tatvavidas tatfamyajganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavani ti shabdyate. So learned transcendentalists realize the absolute truth in three phases, in three facets. So there's the Brahman, the Brahma-Gyoti, there's Paramatma, super soul in the heart, then there's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they're all one. They're non-dual, Advayam. They're all one because they're all of the same quality. They're not matter, they're not material. So they're all one. At the same time, there's a distinction and there's a hierarchy. It's a hierarchy based on intimacy. It's a hierarchy based on intimacy. And so again, continuing themes from previous days' discussions on the same verse, which is the first seed verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, avyaktam vyaktim apanam manyante mama buddhya parambhava janato mam bhutameshram. Krishna says that the less intelligent, they think that this form and personality, Krishna form and personality, playing the flute, driving Arjuna's chariot, like that, Krishna's form and personality popped out of the impersonal Brahma-Gyoti. Because the conception is like, okay, so here we got form and personality and quality, and it's all limited, and it's material, and it's temporary, and it's sources of misery. So therefore, spirit must mean unlimited. So unlimited must mean no form, no personality. That's the Brahma-Gyoti. So as we've discussed in recent days, okay, so that's a pretty common conception. Form, personality, well, then it couldn't be spiritual because form, personality is limited. So you can't put limitations on the absolute. So here we have so Bhagavatam, Krishna saying, to deny the possibility of the supreme, to deny the possibility of the absolute, to have unlimited form and personality. That's limiting. That's limiting the ultimate. It's limiting source. So in this purport to text 33 of chapter 9, Prabhupada is making several references, Nirastukuakam, and other references to the very first verse of Bhagavatam. Just like here, we have 4 seed verses. The first 3 verses of the first chapter of the first canto of Bhagavatam, they're like the invocation verses. It's Vyasadeva giving an invocation. And the first line of the first verse, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmandyasya Tonvedi Tirtashtes. So, oh my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth. And he is the cause of all causes. Svara, independent. There's no other cause beyond him. So this gets at the very core of existence. Gets at the very core, because that's the, it's like what? So what's at the very root? What's at the very substratum of existence itself? So some ideas as well, if we really get to it, it's nothing. It's a big void. It's nothing. Okay. So that's not the Bhagavatam version. Or if we really get to, well, it's matter, like atoms are at the root. So no, that's not as far as nothing, there is no nothing. There is no nothing. Nothing doesn't exist anywhere. Even in deep space, there's the element of ether. Okay, so so not nothing, not matter. Then so at the very root, at the very substratum, there's that undifferentiated spiritual oneness. Okay, that's the Brahma-Gyoti. Now Prabhupada quotes here, like, no, that's not it either. Brahmanohi Pratishtaham. Krishna says in the last verse of the 14th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, I, aham, again, that word, aham, I, personality. And because Prabhupada stresses that, because Krishna stresses it, because there are interpreters who say things like, when it says I, it doesn't really mean the person, it means the unborn within. And so, no, it's the person. So Krishna says, I, the person Krishna. I am the source of the Brahma-Gyoti. I am the source of the Brahma-Gyoti. So at the very substratum of existence, it's not nothing, it's not matter, it's not the undifferentiated spiritual white light. It's transcendental personhood. It's Vasudeva. That's Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudev's name for Krishna. One meaning is the son of Vasudeva. And the core meaning is Vasudeva, same root as Vishnu, means the all-pervading personality. Dantarasta, Pramanu Chantarasta. So that all-pervading personality exists within each atom. Sarvasya Chamvidisani Vistu Matas Matir Ganamapoanamcha exists within the heart. So Krishna is the soul of the soul, the personality. There's nothing beyond the form of Krishna. There's a lot beyond our conception, our misconception, our limited conception of the form of Krishna. So the Vedas emphasize Atashri Krishna Namadi Nabavad Grayam Indriyai Sevan Mukhi Jivadas Svayam Eva Sparat Yada. So that Krishna's form, name, qualities, pastimes, activities, with material senses, we're not going to get them. Our conception will be limited. We're going to try to bring transcendental. What's that word mean? We use it a lot. Prabhupada uses it a lot. Transcendental, trans-empirical, trans-phenomenal, trans-cognitive, trans-rational. Doesn't mean irrational. Doesn't mean it's not logical. It means it's transcendental to our mundane capacity for rationality. It's transcendental to our senses. So just like to study any object, it's vital that we have a suitable means to know the object, right? So, right. So if we want to measure temperature and we have a radio, It's not going to do it. It's not the right means. So if we want to know it, an object that's inferior to us in consciousness, inferior in the sense of less conscious, just like I have desires, you have desires, we all have desires because we're conscious entities. The chair doesn't have a desire. Okay. The pillow doesn't have a desire. That's what it means. It's like less in consciousness. So to study an inanimate object, then there's a particular epistemology, a particular means. Okay, it's logical empiricism. We can control it, study, analyze, take it into our laboratory. To know an entity of, let's say, equal consciousness, to know each other, this kind of, let me study you and analyze you. Well, we might learn something, but Prabhupada uses the term here, that the most confidential, to get confidential knowledge, that way of knowing won't work very well, right? It'll be very limited because you're not a rock. I'm not a rock, right? We're persons. So to get to know a person, the way to do it is to gain your love and trust, serve you, please you, gain your love and trust, then you choose to reveal yourself to me. You choose to reveal yourself to me. So taking that process and applying it to the Supreme Person, Vasudeva Sri Krishna Bhagavan, the technical name for that is bhakti. The technical name for that is bhakti. We can look rationally. So if we're studying the Supreme Person, the source of the trees, the source of the human brain, the source of the rotation of the planets, then does it make more sense to use a way of knowing that tends to be for studying rocks, or a way of knowing that tends to be for studying evolved conscious living entities like ourselves? Because this is a much more evolved conscious living entity. So it makes sense to use that bhakti method. And then, okay, so Prabhupada uses the term the last snare of Maya, the last snare, and he uses that term frequently in his writings. Because, okay, so basically Maya, the force of illusion, in its gross form, it's just like, yeah, I think I'm this body. Yeah, and I think by material acquisition, I'll be happy, either gross or subtle, by popularity, or people give me compliments, or I get a bigger bank account, like that. Because I'm this body, so if I satisfy the senses, I'll be happy. All right. So then, as one says, what one experiences maybe after a few years, few lifetimes, whatever, this is actually a futile endeavor. This is empty. This is always chasing the carrot on the stick. The example is given like an animal can wander into the desert and start feeling so thirsty and sees a mirage. It looks like an oasis, and the animal runs after it, but it's always another 100 yards away, and eventually the animal dies. So we it's feel like spiritual death in this desert of material life. So we think, yeah, I want to, this is futile. Let me go for happiness within, for spiritual life. As Saint Francis said, we are searching for what is searching. So those qualities we're looking for: peace, empowerment, power, love, value, security, value, fulfillment, that they're actually intrinsic to the self. So let me go for that Atma Rama, self-satisfied quality. Okay, and then that sometimes leads, and so there's something praiseworthy about that, like to give up the futile attempt for fulfillment and satisfaction in that which is dead, in dead matter. And then it can lead to the, but at the core is the enjoying spirit, anandamayo vyasat. Our nature is to be enjoying and happy, yeah. So I'll do my God project here. I'll do my David Wolf God project. I'll be the center, and I'll enjoy and say, yeah, this is leading to one misery after the next. So let me go for spiritual life. Let me renounce matter. Sure. But if the enjoying spirit is still there, then I can go to the last snare of Maya. Actually, I am God. Actually, I am the one. I am you. You are me. It takes so many forms of language that, yes, that actually I just have this whole idea of separation is an illusion, that I am the supreme. I am God. And so are you. We just haven't realized it yet. Like that. So that sort of conception. And of course, achintya beta beta tattva, simultaneous one in difference. We are the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in many respects. We're not exactly the same. Just as the sun rays have many shared qualities with the sun globe, but the sun rays are not exactly like the sun globe. And in important respects, we are different than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we're not completely different. That's achintya beta beta tattva. Just as the sun rays are different than the sun globe, they're not completely different. They also emanate heat and light and like that. Okay. So this last snare of Maya, it can be very, very sad. It can be very sad, because then the goal becomes I want to be God rather than I want to serve God. That's why, like, okay, let's just look at, like, maybe like an ordinary materialist, put that in quotes. Not every soul is distinctive, but an ordinary materialist who has some piety, and maybe they just work for enjoyment, but they have some maybe they have some devotion to Mother Mary and Jesus, or the Buddha, or Muhammad, like that. Some devotion. But maybe their life is basically around making money and enjoying family life and like that, and it's not like intense absorption in spirit, or there's not much renunciation there. So in some ways, they are, from a spiritual consciousness hierarchy point of view, in some ways, such a soul is less than a realized impersonalist who has truly accomplished detachment from matter, at least temporarily, detachment from matter, but is in the paradigm of I am the absolute, I am the supreme, not realizing the distinction between the sun rays and the sun. So in some ways, that sort of materialist pious person is less than. In some ways, that material pious person is greater than, because they got some bhakti going on. Whereas that impersonally realized soul, and just to clarify, in Bhagavad-Gita, right, in Chapter 7 purports, Prabhupada says, there's no conflict between personalist and impersonalist. Like we want to appreciate the Supreme Personality of God in his energy of water, Rasoham Apsu Kanteya, light. Prabhasmi Sasti Soya, Krishna says, I am the light of the sun and the moon. So we can appreciate the energy of the absolute, and we can appreciate the personal source. Krishna, you are so kind. So there's no conflict. Sometimes Prabhupada says, there's the personalist, there's the impersonalist, and there's the devotee. Emphasize it. The devotee is not in any camp. I mean, the devotee appreciates all aspects of the Supreme, personal, impersonal, localized in the heart. So for that impersonally realized soul, or aspiring for impersonalization, a problem can be that the possibility for intimacy is gone, because intimacy means two people who choose to exchange affection. But if my conception is it's all one, I am one with everything. What did the yogi say when he went into the pizza parlor? Make me one with everything. Excuse me. Excuse my offenses, but it just came out of me. It was super soul. What could I say? Okay, so yes, Damayanti's either laughing or crying. I'm not sure. She's doing something there. Okay, so all right. So but then there's no chance of intimacy. Like there is some spiritual progress there, but there's no chance of intimacy because, like, if I am you and you're me, then there's no exchange of love. There's no exchange of love. So Prabhupada's emphasizing again and again here. One should therefore have as his ultimate aim of realization, not the impersonal feature, but the personal feature of the absolute truth for our own bliss. That's the enduring state of ever-increasing bliss, ever-increasing enthusiasm to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead with love and devotion. So there's always that separation, and that separation is bridged through that loving devotion. So whether it's that first verse of Bhagavatam, whether it's the first of the seed verses, the personal feature is emphasized. It's also emphasized to not bring our material conceptions to spiritual form, to spiritual personality. So these are the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, teachings of Bhagavatam, and just, I'll say, apart from, or in addition to the teachings, there's also, I'll call it, the realizations of the speakers of Bhagavatam. So Vyasadeva himself, he's the one who starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, okay, so we know, many of us are familiar with the story. Vyasadeva compiled all the Vedas, these tremendous literatures, meeting everyone where they're at, to connect where they're at, and then to gradually advance towards sattva, towards spiritual life, towards transcendence. And that's why some of the Vedas can seem like, well, they're contradictory. No, it's just the supreme educator meeting different students where they're at. And so the details might seem different, but the goal's always the same, to support evolution of the consciousness to higher modes of nature, ultimately to transcendence. So Vyasadeva, after he hears from Narada Muni that, look, you compiled the Upanishad, even Vedanta Sutra, Narada Muni says, yep, Tatvayasam Tirtam. He says, these literatures are like a pilgrimage place for crows. Like if there's a dead animal, the crows will gather and munch on that stuff. So Narada Muni's not. It's not like Vyasadeva wrote like cheap romance novels or something. I mean, he wrote the Vedas, for God's sake, but Narada Muni is saying, nah, this is like for crows. We want the swan-like literature, swan-like literatures. Tadvad Visargo Jana, that can really create a revolution in consciousness. Tadvad Visargo Jana Tagaviplavu Yasmin Pratishloka Yabhadavat Yapinamanyanantasya Yashon Kitanya Srivantiganti Grinanti Sata. That's the swan, like for swans. Swans are apparently known. There could be a mixture of water and milk, and they can extract the nectar, extract the milk. Quite different than crows. So we can see even amongst the bird type species, there are so many distinctions. Okay. So then Vyasadeva heard from Narada Muni, went into a trance. He was there on the river, on the banks of the river Sarasvati, and it's described there's all sorts of berry trees around his ashram. He went into Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranite Malay Apasha Pusham Para Pusham Purnam Mayam Chata Pashrayam. And he went into a trance of bhakti. And his realization of the absolute is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His realization of the absolute was not the jiva, that we are the absolute, or Maya. Maya was on the back of Krishna, serving Krishna, or the impersonal oneness with no qualities. No, Krishna is the absolute. So this is the realization of the compiler of all the Vedas. There's his teachings and there's his personal realization. And Vyasadeva goes on, and he saw in his trance of bhakti, Yaya Samohito Jiva Atmanam Trigunatmakam. Yes, and that he saw that Paropi Manote Nartam Tatkritam Chabipadyate. He saw that, okay, so there's these living entities, especially at the dawn of the age of Kali, the living entities, and they're really suffering. They is us. They're really suffering. And the root cause of all, again, the root cause of all suffering is they're thinking that the spiritual self is the material body, gross or subtle, right? We're not the hardware, we're not the software, we're the operator of the computer. And Vyasadeva felt true compassion. And he goes, yeah, I compared all this literature, but this isn't really going to help them. And that led to him giving us Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, Srimad Bhagavatam always existed. He revealed it. He wrote it down. Anarto Pashaman Sakshat Bhakti Yogam at Hokshaje Lokasya Janata Vidvams Chakre Satvata Samhitam. So anarta means that which is superfluous, that which does not get at the root. And so Vyasadeva saw, to really get at the root, we need to give this Bhagavatam, this Sarva Veda Dihasanam Saram Samudrita, the cream of the Vedic literatures, Nigama Kapadora Galitampalam Sukhamukha Amrita Stravya Samyatam, Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam, Mohara Horisika Bhui Bavuka. O expert and thoughtful sages, relish Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures that emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even tastier, although it was already relishable for everyone, including liberated souls. So Vyasadeva is saying, yes, to get that, to get rid of that which is superfluous, that which is shallow, to get at the root. And as a result, Chakre Satvata Samhitam, he gave Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's just like, okay, so there's this misery, there's these anartas, there's this pain, suffering, deception, and the solution is bhakti yoga, and people won't get it from the books I've given so far. So he gave Bhagavatam. So it's important to understand, because otherwise we can go different places, yoga center, Vedas, this, that. It's important to see how bhakti is the thread that ties it all together. And then, of course, so Prabhupada mentions disciplic succession here. And so Vyasadeva's own son and disciple, Shukadeva Goswami, again, just in closing, that, so we talked about Vyasadeva's personal realization, then Shukadeva Goswami's personal realization. It's a foundational verse of Bhagavatam. All verses of Bhagavatam are transcendental. Some are particularly foundational for our understanding. So text 10 of chapter 7 of Canto 1, it's called the Atma Rama verse. Atma Rama is a Sanskrit term meaning self-satisfied. Atma Rama's Muneo, Nirganti Apirukrame, Kravanti Tukim Bhaktim, Itam Bhuta Guno Hari. So Shukadeva Goswami, he was a realized impersonalist. Okay, means he had no attraction to temporary form. He had no attraction to cheap romance novels. He had no attraction to material activity, material quality. And then he got so attracted to hearing about Krishna and the gopis. He got so attracted to hearing about Krishna and the cowherd boys, and Krishna and Vrindavan, and Krishna. He got so attracted by hearing Bhagavatam. So and he's the speaker of the Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva's the compiler, Shukadev's the speaker. So it's very important. So what's that mean? It means the form of Krishna is nothing material. The activities of Krishna is nothing material, because Shukadeva Goswami had no interest in anything material. And so he had no interest in anything. So that's his realization, that the Bhagavan realization, it's more intimate, it gets to the root. It's the source of the impersonal Brahma-Gyoti, the impersonal Brahma-Gyoti. So again, following on a theme from yesterday's discussion, we get to cultivate the capacity to realize, as described in the Sri Upanishad, Om Purnam Madaha Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vishishyate. We get to realize how everything, even or especially the pain, suffering, things that not going according to my script at all, that it's a complete and perfect arrangement for me to develop deeper love, deeper inspiration to serve Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 33, the first of the seed verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ahameva sameva agre nanyadyat sadasat param paschad aham yade tachcha yo vashishe tasosmyaham. Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, thanks for listening. Thanks for your attention. And thanks for your absorption in Srimad Bhagavatam. I welcome any questions or comments. Len Cohen.
I just have a little bit of a confusion in my mind about the Brahma Jyoti.
Okay.
Of course, I understand that this is one aspect of Krishna. It's not the cause of all causes. It's just one cause. But like at the top of page 543, it says, the Lord's impersonal feature, Brahma Jyoti, is existent in the material world because the personal form of the Lord cannot be perceived by the material senses. So the purport's not saying then that the Brahma Jyoti is a material and that therefore it's visible, is it? Or, I mean, the Brahma Jyoti, is it visible to the material eyes? That's my question.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Yes, I appreciate that. Now, my understanding of that, so yeah, for sure, in material eyes, we're not getting experience of, because the Brahma Jyoti is also transcendental. So I guess my understanding of that is that Brahman in that respect refers to the energies. So sure, with our material senses, we certainly don't have access to all the energies. At the same time, material energy, it's part of Brahman. It is part of Brahman. So we do have access, even with material senses, to some energies, to some aspects of Brahman, to some energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a purport in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita where Prabhupada talks about there are different types of Brahman. There's like the white light, but Prabhupada says Prakriti, material energy, is also Brahman. Brahman means an energy of the Supreme. So I think Prabhupada's talking there about the facet of even in material conditioned life, we have access to the Prakriti energy, which is also part of Brahman. That's my understanding there.
So the Brahmajyoti is part of the material energy. It's not, but it's more than that. That's a
Yeah,
small part of it.
yeah,
Some of those energies we can see with our material eyes, but not all of the Brahmajyoti, not the all aspects of it.
yes,
And of course, we're never going to have a relationship with it because it's impersonal.
yeah,
That's the main thing.
yeah,
So that it is possible then to see a portion of the Brahmajyoti with your material eyes.
yeah, yeah. If we look at the sun, we look at the automobile, that's part of Brahman. That's part of Brahman.
Okay, but we're not going to see this any spiritual aspects of the Brahmajyoti with our material eyes.
Right, right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
including like the Jiva spirit soul. We're also part of the Brahma-Gyoti, but we're not seeing ourselves as soul. We're not seeing each other as spirit soul. So we're not going to get those aspects until we purify our senses, starting with the tongue, starting with chanting and hearing. Yeah.
okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhaktilan.
Brahman and Brahma Jyoti are used. The Brahman and Brahma Jyoti are used they're used synonymously.
Brahman and Brahma-Gyoti, we can use them synonymously.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe if we did an intricate study of all of Prabhupada's usage, maybe there's some distinction, but definitely he uses them synonymously in some way. Keith.
Yeah, so I guess, like, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, when it's talking about I am splendor, fire, and the moon, I am the pure taste and water, he's giving us like a practical way that we can sift through all the material vision of this world to get a taste of that Brahma Gyoti sight. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm the light of the sun. Precisely. Yeah, Krishna's giving us ways to begin to realize Brahman in matter, to realize spirit. Yes, that's correct. That's a main point of so many descriptions in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam of material energies. You know, there's like Shabda Ke Purusham Nishu, and Krishna says, I'm the sound in the ether. There's a lecture where Prabhupada, he talks about the sound of thunder. We can realize God. But then Prabhupada says, even if you hear an airplane, right? So like we could think of nature, but Prabhupada, even if you hear an airplane, okay, that sound, that's also Krishna. Krishna says, I am the taste and water. He says, even if the drunkard, he drinks his wine and he's thinking, this is Krishna. Prabhupada says, very good, very good. All the energies are Krishna. And then as the spirit soul progresses in that realization, then more and more, there's nothing material. Even the sound of the airplane, we're seeing Krishna in that. It's helping us. So then that's why it's described for the Uttama Adhikari, for Krishna himself. There is no material energy. It's all spiritual. We don't want to do a spiritual bypass. For me, many energies, like I can click to different places on the internet, and it's material because it drags my consciousness down. But for a pure devotee, it's not material. So I appreciate those references, Keith. Thanks for that.
Yeah, so like the pure taste of water, it's just the easiest way for us. It's the most clear way for us to perceive that versus seeing it in a bottle of wine. It's kind of like takes a certain level of purity or realization to be able to do that. But tasting water, or I mean, I would just do like a dumb kid. I can look at a fire and really be captivated.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate your realizations and what the point you're bringing out. Thanks for that, Keith. Any other comments or questions or realizations? Keith.
Could you talk more about the? I'd like to actually write down what that verse is about the Atma Tattva or the Atma Ram.
Atma Rama? Sure. Yeah. Well, I could speak a bit about it. So, I mean, arguably, that's the most important verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, some could say the verse we're reading today is the most important. Some could say the first verse or the second verse of the first canto. But okay, so it's Canto 1, Chapter 7, Text 10. It's called the Atma Rama verse. If we study Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find that several times in his pastimes, Lord Chaitanya explained the Atma Rama verse. He's explained the Atma Rama verse to Prakshananda Sarasvati in 64 or 63 different, he gave 63 different purports to the Atma Rama verse. This is an important verse. Okay. So this verse, it's Sutta Goswami. It's Sutta Goswami speaking to the sages at Namesharanya, and Sutta Goswami speaking about his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami. And he's speaking about the pastimes of his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, who was Brahman realized. Shukadeva Goswami was Brahman realized. He was Atmarama, self-satisfied. He wasn't looking for any gross or subtle material gratification. He was an Atmarama, means self-sasatisfied. In one sense, all coaching is to support clients to come to the sense of Atmarama, that, yeah, maybe I'm entering into a relationship not from need or fear or insecurity. I'm entering into a relationship from a place of self-satisfaction to enhance life purpose, increase bliss. I'm entering into this business, this career, not from need, from a place of self-satisfaction and expanding bliss. So Shukadeva Goswami was self-satisfied, and he was so self-satisfied he didn't want to come out of the womb. He stayed in the womb of his mother for 16 years, and his father, Srila Vyasadeva, called on Krishna himself, and Krishna talked. Shukadeva Goswami, okay, come out. Krishna promised him, look, I promise you won't be degraded by material energy. You can come out of the womb. So Shukadeva Goswami came out of the room, came out of the room of the womb. And then he just started walking away, and his father Vyasadeva was following him. Come back, come back. And it's described that Shukadeva Goswami was so self-satisfied that as he was passing along, so there was like a lake or a pond, and there were some young ladies there, and they were naked, they were bathing. And when Shukadeva Goswami passed, they didn't even bother to cover themselves, because they knew that he wasn't making any distinction between bodies. He was really Brahman realized. Then a few minutes later, when his father Vyasadeva passed, and this is Vyasadeva, the compiler of the Vedas, quite a realized soul, but the young ladies in the pond, they covered themselves, because Vyasadeva, he was in Grahastha Ashram, he made distinctions between male bodies and female bodies, so they covered themselves. With Shukadeva Goswami, they didn't even bother, because he made no distinctions, completely Brahman realized. So he had no material attraction. Atmaramas tamunio, nirgantiyat yerukrami, kurvanti hetu kim bhakti itambuto guno hari. And then Vyasadeva, through some bhakti yoga sages in the forest, he heard a few verses of Bhagavatam. I'm not clear right now which verses, but he heard a few verses from the 10th canto of Krishna's pastimes. And he was attracted. And he had no attraction to the girls in the lake. He had no attraction to be famous or well-known or adored. Brahman realized, and he was attracted to Krishna's pastimes. So this verse proves that Bhagavan realization is superior to impersonal realization. because someone completely impersonal realized was attracted to the pastimes of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Then Shukadeva Goswami wanted to hear all of Bhagavatam, and so his father Vyasadeva gladly shared with him all of Bhagavatam. And then Shukadeva Goswami, he came into the assembly of sages and Maharaj Parikshit there on the bank of the Ganges. And of all, there was Narada Muni and Vyasadeva and Vasishtha Muni and Agastya Muni, and there was all these great sages and devotees, and they chose Shukadeva Goswami to be the speaker of Bhagavatam. They chose him to be the speaker. He had the most profound bhakti realizations. So that's, I'm going to say the main import of that Atma Rama verse, Canto 1, Chapter 7, Text 10, that a completely Brahman realized soul is attracted to the pastimes of Krishna. That indicates the pastimes of Krishna or the pastimes of Nrsimhadev, all incarnations of Bhagavan. Of course, Ete Chamsakla Pumsa, Krishna's true Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the source of all incarnations. That the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the form, the name, they are not material. Because the common misconception and personal conception is if it has form, name, personality, activity, it must be below the impersonal Brahman. But no, this is transcendental form. Thanks for getting me to speak about that, Keith.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling it probably the most important verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the sense that I guess it's like meeting us conditioned souls where we're at, and I can see in myself that I have a strong desire, internal desire to have that realization, really stronger desire for that than serve Krishna, to be honest with you. And it's I guess a liberated from material misery state of being liberated from material misery. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and I think it's I really like this pastime with Shukadeva Goswami when he gets up and walks away from his father. It reminded me of this term that I heard from amongst my family, Roman Catholics or whatever. They try to kind of shirk off some other philosophy that they're not familiar with. They try to say, oh, that's a man-made philosophy, right? And it's just, I don't know, it just seems like I couldn't see how any normal person could possibly come up with that scenario in their imagination, right? It's I don't know, it's kind of funny, yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to ask one question also, because I'm a little confused about this situation with Vyasadeva and him, because in one sense I understand that Vyasadeva, he's Shaktivesh Avatar, is a completely pure soul. And then they see that he has some, because he took on family life, he's relating with material energy. So they see him as they need to protect themselves from him, versus Shukadeva Goswami. So I'm a little curious about that. What, because it almost seems, in a way, it almost looks at it in a way like he's materially contaminated, when also I know that he's not, I know that he, it says the Paramahamsa is supposed to make distinction between the devotees and the demons. So I kind of get that, but I also understand that he's not contaminated by those.
We certainly don't want to see that Vyasadeva was contaminated in any way. First of all, I'm appreciating your humorous appreciation of that pastime. Yeah, and that's because we can go whatever our most favorite Hollywood movie or novel is, and we look at the pastimes of the Bhagavatam, just so much more far out and amazing. yeah, who could think of such things? And so, yes. So no, we don't want to see Vyasadeva as contaminated. And I'm not going to speak for I don't know what the consciousness was of the damsels in the pond there, but that Vyasadeva in that particular pastime, he's serving or playing in a particular role of grahasta who makes distinctions between male and female bodies. So not that he's contaminated, but he's serving and playing in a particular role in that pastime. That's the way I understand.
Yeah. So I guess those damsels, they probably would have known. He would have been quite well known in the area. They probably knew who he was. They knew the damsels. They would have known that he was family life. They had knowledge of scripture, and So I guess that was the way that they were perceiving him because of their knowledge of scripture or whatever. It's not that necessarily that they were feeling. It's not necessarily that he was looking at them as material bodies or whatever, and they were kind of like needed to protect themselves from him. It's just they, I guess, understood that the situation that he's engaged in material life, so they just knew that they should cover themselves from him according to the Vedic etiquette, something like that, I guess.
The way you describe it, Keith, makes sense to me. And Rukmini writes, naked damsels didn't see the need to follow the common etiquette of shyness with Shukadev Goswami, but with Vyasadeva they did. And Rukmini is putting etiquette in all caps. So thanks for that, Rukmini. Yeah.
I have a funny comment about that too.
Yes, yeah, right.
Shukadev Goswami was naked and Vyasadeva was dressed. So just by that, there is an indication of their consciousness and status. And like you said, like the Uttama Adhikari sometimes need to come to a place of Madhyama Adhikari to make distinction in order to preach. So it's a little bit like that for Vyasadeva.
Excellent point. All wonderful points. Yeah. Thanks for that. The principle of etiquette. Etiquette indicates the damsels, they weren't seeing as in any way Vyasadeva as material or lusty, but there's a particular etiquette. And then your point, Malini, it can make us smile that Shukadev Goswami himself, he was naked. And whereas Vyasadeva was playing like a more upstanding member of society, and he was wearing clothes. And so there's a different etiquette from the damsels in relation to each of them. Thank you, Malini, Rukmini, and Keith. Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments?
I also like something about the picture of when he's coming up to the assembly of the sages, and all these there's like women and children following him. It's just everybody's so attracted to him, right? And I don't know. I have some kind of like picture of him in that I can't really describe it. I couldn't describe it in a way that would sound proper, but I don't know. I just, for some reason, it makes me appreciate him, that they felt that he was such an innocent, pure, attractive person that, that they're just following him around, and
such sweet, potent pastimes. I mean, it's described about the Goswamis. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paral Premam Ritambo Nidhi Dhira Janapriya Priya Karel Nirmatsarel Pujita Sri Chaitanya Kripa Baral Bhuvi Bhuvo Bharavahantara Kal Bande Upasanatana Raghu Yogal Sri Jiva Gopala Kal. That the Goswamis, they were dear to the scholars and the refined ladies and gentlemen, and they were very dear to the ruffians. So what you share, Keith, about Shukadev Goswami's pastimes as described in the first canto of Bhagavatam, yeah, that he was kind of maybe the sort of ruffians, not like the kind of forest tribal people, and they were following him. It's described. They were perhaps, they didn't understand his greatness, but they were attracted to him, and they were like mocking him a bit. So, but they were attracted. And then he comes into the clearing on the Ganges with all these sages, and the sages, they offer him the Vyasasan. And so for the tribal people who were following him and were attracted, but kind of mocking him, maybe they thought he was like a fool or something. But then they were shocked, because then we come into all these sages, and the sages are honoring him as the greatest sage. So everyone was attracted to Shukadev Goswami, just like everyone was attracted to the Goswamis. Thank you. Wonderful point. Hare Krishna. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam.
Jai.
Jai. Thank you, Dhira Govinda Prabhu.
Thank you, Sudarshan Prabhu. Thanks for your association. Hare Krishna.